Hello, welcome to today's Student Success Workshop on listening and note-taking. So for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Raquel Lado. I work here at Algoma University in the Learning Center. I'm a learning strategist and I work with students helping them develop their school skills and learning strategies to be more efficient and effective. Today we're going to talk about listening and note-taking. Again, some very important skills that students need to have. So we're going to cover quite a few things today. We're going to talk about listening in and of itself, what to do before a lecture, some note-taking strategies, some note-taking styles, abbreviations and how to use them in your note-taking to make you a little bit faster and more efficient, after class, and some errors. And it says activity, but I'm not actually going to be showing a little video clip, but I'm going to let you know where to view it if you want to on your own. So we're going to begin with, why are good listening and note-taking skills so important? There's quite a few reasons. First of all, they're the only link to a lecture. So you may have access to a professor's PowerPoints, which may be on the course management system, which is a wonderful sort of contribution to your notes, but they are not the only thing. A PowerPoint doesn't cover all the information. So you still need your own notes to complement the PowerPoint. So they become the only link to the lecture. They become a very important study tool. You're going to use them again later. Not all information comes from the textbook, and actually a good professor is not just teaching from a textbook. A professor is an expert in their field, so they have a lot of their own research, a lot of their own knowledge and database of information that they want to share with you that may or may not already be in the textbook they're using. So you'll find many of them sort of use an approach where they do some things from the textbook and then some things they bring in of their own as well. Many professors base exam questions on lectures. I actually had a professor that went so far as to tell us the first day, on every test and midterm and exam, 50% of the questions came from the textbook, 50% of the questions came from the lectures. Note-taking is also, it helps you a lot when you're actually in class. It helps you remember the information, it keeps you active in class, it keeps you engaged in class. If we were just sitting there, not taking notes or anything, it becomes much more easier to stop paying attention to the professor. So note-taking keeps us on task and keeps us focused a lot more. Okay? So there's a lot of reasons why good note-taking skills are so important. So active listening. Now, listening requires hearing and understanding. It also involves paying attention and concentration. It's difficult to listen and pay attention to more than one thing at a time. At university, the level of listening we're talking about here is very active and engaged, and it should take all of your focus. Okay? But effective listening requires attending to your basic needs like hunger and sleep. So just a word about sleep in general. Most university students, I think, go around sort of chronically sleep deprived because they stay up too late at night and then get up early in the morning. But the more tired we are and the more sort of chronically sleep deprived we are, it becomes very, very difficult to sustain the attention that we need to in a university class. Getting enough sleep is very, very important. Okay, so guidelines to effective listening. If you find that you are easily distracted within a classroom, it's probably a good idea for you to come and sit closer to the front. The fewer number of people between you and the professor, the better. Okay? Put things away that you don't need, things so you're not fidgeting with things. And then resist focusing on other sounds. So an example is you might be sitting in the second row and there's people behind you having a conversation. You can't listen to the conversation behind you and the professor at the same time. So to resist focusing on other sounds means you have to sort of block out one to pay attention to the other. Pay attention to the content of the lecture, not the instructor's appearance or delivery. Now, many professors have their own unique style of giving a lecture. For me right now, because I'm being videotaped, I don't really have very much room to move. Whereas if there was no video camera and there's actually a room full of people here, I probably would be walking around a little bit more than I am. Some professors pace, so they sort of constantly move back and forth. Others actually prefer to stay still. I went so far as had a professor that spent the entire class looking down at his notes like this and never ever looked up at the class. So their delivery can be distracting, it can be boring, okay? But you need to pay attention to the content. What is the information they're providing you? Not how they look when they provide it and the method they're providing it, all right? Also, put aside emotional concerns and judgments. So there's a lot of things that could come into play here. First of all, you may not like your professor. Well, you don't have to like your professor. You have to learn from your professor, and there's a big difference there. You may disagree with some of the things they say, and that's okay too. Okay? You may have other emotions going through your brain that have nothing to do with class whatsoever. So let's say you got into a fight with your roommate that morning, right? And it's still sort of brewing and circulating around in your head. You're not really going to be listening to the professor. You've got too much going on inside. When you're in class, ask questions if there's something you missed or did not understand. Guaranteed there's someone else in the class who didn't understand it either. And nobody wants to put up their hand and ask. Okay? There's nothing wrong with asking for something to be repeated, or for asking the professor to slow down, or asking the professor just, could you explain that in a different way because I don't really think I got it. Learn to refocus quickly. If you find all of a sudden that you're sort of doodling on the edge of your paper and you don't really know what's happening, you need to refocus and pay attention. The easiest way to do that is lift your head up and make eye contact with the professor. Look them right in the face and get yourself back on track for listening. And you keep working on listening, especially in a 3-hour class. A 3-hour class, especially if it's a class that you don't really love maybe, or it's a challenging material for you, that's a long time to maintain focus. Okay? So you sort of have to keep reminding yourself to do so. Now, prior to a lecture, before you get there, one of the goals should be to do the required readings. And it seems that I talk about this in organization workshops and reading workshops and study workshops. I talk about it a lot because it really is important. You have a course outline that has a reading schedule. The goal of the professor would be that every student would have that reading done before they get to class. And there's reasons for that, okay? It's going to help you take notes. Because you've been introduced to the vocabulary and the terms through reading before the class, when the professor's talking, you're not now hearing them for the first time. You know how to spell them. You generally know what they're about. So your note-taking is going to be better for that. It's going to help you understand the lecture a lot more, which is going to help you identify the main points. And it's just overall going to help you remember a lot more. So get that reading done beforehand. Now, immediately before the lecture, and by immediately I mean like, an hour or so before the lecture, review the notes from the previous lectures. Okay? So, especially with the night class, because you haven't had that class for a full week. So a lot has happened in that time, and quite honestly, you probably don't remember very much of what you did last week, and you probably remember 0 of what you did 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. So take a little bit of time and read over your notes before you get to class. It's going to help you, remind you of what the main points are. It's going to remind you, oh, this is what we talked about last week. The professor's probably going to build on that this week. It's going to help with remembering. And what it's going to do is create a mindset for that class. It's going to get you sort of ready to learn, focused on that class. The vocabulary, the concepts sort of all coming back. And it's going to help with your note-taking and your overall understanding of the lecture. Okay, so note-taking during class. You walk into class, the first thing you do is you sort of get physically ready. You find a seat that works for you, you get comfortable, you have lots of paper. We're never environmental when we're note-taking. Lots of paper, pens, highlighters, whatever. Put things away that you don't need. You don't need to be checking your cell phone for text messages in the middle of class all the time. Put it away. Label, date, and number your pages. Take a second just before class begins, put your course code, put the date, and then number pages. Turn your cell phone off and put it away. All right, so some note-taking strategies here. Good note-taking does not mean writing down everything. So, it's a challenge in some classes to determine what do I write. And it's a skill. Distinguishing important from unimportant information, it's a skill that improves over time, but also with exposure with the professor's style. And so as you become more and more familiar with the class and the way the professor works, you'll start to learn what their style is, and you'll start to learn to understand what do they do when something's important, or what clues do they give me that I should be writing something down. When you are taking notes, you never ever write in full sentences. The goal with note-taking is the least amount of words with the most amount of information. So we don't want full sentences. Any little words we don't need, we don't write them, okay? We want sort of bare bones. It's enough that it's going to trigger our memory and help us later, but it's not so much that we're writing and writing and writing and writing, and we're sort of always 3 or 4 steps behind the professor. So let me just give you an example here of points versus sentences. The professor is going to talk like this, okay? So magnesium is an important factor in the regulation of the body's temperature, blah, 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 blah. But what you want to strive to write in your notes is something like what's over here. You want to pull out just those main important pieces of information and write them down. So title magnesium, we underline it. An important factor in 1, 2, 3. Common dietary sources 1, 2, 3, 4. So what's nice about this format is that 1, it's obviously much faster to write. 2, it's a lot easier to read later. And 3, it helps in your studying. By putting numbers with things, which is sort of an outline format of note-taking, it helps you because you think, okay, magnesium. There's 3 things I need to remember. It's important in 3 ways. And that number 3 then acts as a trigger for you. And there's 4 ways to get it in your body. What are the 4 dietary sources? Okay? So notes should be points only, bare bones, most important information. How can I say the most with the least amount of words? Okay, so when you're listening to a professor, listen for their cue words. Definitions, dates, especially in history, concepts, lists. Lists are very important because they often turn into short answer questions. So there are 3 types of, there are 3 causes of. Today I'm going to discuss with you 5 reasons why something happened and so on. Other keywords, advantages, disadvantages, reasons, types, examples, to summarize. Pay attention to the professor's body language. If they all of a sudden start speaking a little bit louder, it's probably because that piece of information is important to them. If they start moving around the room a little bit more, or if they just all of a sudden seem a lot more excited about something, if it's important to them, they're probably in some way letting you know, and you know that you need to write that down in your notes. Look for repetition of ideas. If a professor talks about something and repeats whatever it might be, let's say, but repeats it 2 or 3 times, they're probably repeating it to make sure that you are getting it down in your notes. So it should be written down. Copy everything that's presented to you, obviously. And then here I go again with the PowerPoint thing. A good PowerPoint does not say everything. So what should happen is, if the professor uses PowerPoint, that's going to be a starting base, but they're going to actually provide a lot of additional information. So a good strategy is, if the professor provides PowerPoints beforehand, what you can do is print them off in such a way that you can write notes beside them. And so you can print them off, and then you can add your notes right there with the slide. Another thing you can do is, if the professor doesn't provide the PowerPoints until after class, and there's a lot of professors that do this, what you can do then is your own notes, is you can simply write slide 1. And then you don't have to recopy the slide because you know you're going to get it. So you copy down your own notes about that slide, and then you put slide 2, and then your notes and so on. And then afterwards, when the PowerPoint's provided to you, you print off the PowerPoint, you just go through on your paper and you number 1, 2, 3, and then you have sort of a system there where they match. Okay? But if you are just thinking, oh, all I have to do is print off the PowerPoints and reread them, and I'll be good to go for the test, highly unlikely. Okay? You're missing a lot of information. Okay, I'm going to talk about 3 note-taking styles. A note-taking style is simply a way to organize your notes. What we don't want to see is starting at the top of the page with a dash or a bullet, and I write a point, and then a dash and information, a dash and information, a dash and information. And I've got a whole page of this, and then I have 2 pages of it, and 3 pages of it, and I have no headings, and I have no subheadings, and I have no idea of what goes with what. Okay? So these note-taking styles are ways that you can organize your notes so that when you look at them later, you have a very good sense of what information works together. And university exams and midterms often focus on sort of synthesis of ideas. They're not regurgitation of independent facts. Okay, so the first one we're going to talk about is the Cornell system. It's been around for a long time. The next slide is actually going to show us an example of it. But what the Cornell system does is it divides the paper into 2 columns. One is narrower and one is wider. The idea being that one is the main idea, just written down, and the other column is the details that go with it. So sort of the different parts of the paper have different functions. Then at the bottom, you leave space where you can put in key points or questions or anything like that. So let's have a look at what it actually looks like. Okay, so the idea paper. You could just use the margin on like regular lined paper, or you could make it a little bit bigger. Over here, I just simply write down what is the main idea. So the main idea here is daily nutrition, okay? I got veggies and fruits and dairy. And over there I put my details, okay? So 5 to 10 servings a day. I need variety, different colors and types, source of vitamins and fiber, and dairy, and so on. Okay, and then at the very bottom, I've got no star, 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 no all groups, servings per day and sources for exam. So this is the Cornell system. So at a very easy glance, I can see exactly what is the idea, what is the detail, okay? Now an outline system uses numbers and letters to create a linear outline. I would say that probably an outline system is the most common type of note-taking that I see among students. So let's have a look at the same information again with an outline style. Okay, so this is where now I'm utilizing the bullets and the dashes. So I've got again daily nutrition, veg and fruit, my bullets, dairy, my bullets. Also with the outline style, indenting is good. Okay, so I indent underneath things so that I can see how things work together. Now a concept map is the third style. A concept map is a visual drawing of the information. And it's very, very good when you have links between things and processes that you want to demonstrate. So just with using the same information, a concept map would look like this. Daily nutrition is the biggest circle, and then I shoot off there for veggies and fruits and my points and so on. So there is no right or wrong way. Okay? You can have your notes even be a combination of different things. But what you want to make sure is at the end of the day, when you look back at that to help you study, you need to know, what were we talking about here? So what is this, and how does this relate, and so on. And that's going to help you a lot with your studying, because as I said, you're not going to just be tested on regurgitating isolated facts. Most of the time in university, you're tested on sort of a synthesis of ideas. You're comparing and contrasting. You're linking ideas together. And so when your notes are already in a way that you can see how ideas work together, it's going to make things much easier. Okay, now abbreviations. Regardless of what style you use or how your notes look, abbreviations are very, very important. So I always say use your texting skills. There's a whole litany of abbreviations and short forms that we use when people are texting. Now a lot of them are not going to apply, obviously, to your class, right? But the idea behind it is still the same, okay? So you want to develop a system of abbreviations and be consistent with it. You want to leave enough of the word to recognize it. But the idea is the abbreviations or the short forms allow you to physically be faster with your note-taking, okay? So let's look at some common sort of abbreviations, okay? So there's a lot that most of us do that are sort of standard, right? So with, for example, is the W with either a line beside it or a line over top of it. Without, W/O, and so on. But we can also use a lot of symbols in our note-taking. Like we can use an equal sign, an and sign, money, the number sign, less than, more than, an up arrow for an increase or down arrow for decrease. For math, we can use the therefore symbol. Okay, so we can use a lot of symbols as a way to be much more faster. And then some really common ones, for example, we all do, EX, especially ESP. And on the other column, I've got some different ones. So for government, I put GOV. Probably even more common than that would be GOVT. Now, for psychology, psychologist, and psychological, okay? So if you're in a psych class, you're going to hear these words all the time. But you don't want to use the same abbreviation for all of them. So you don't want to use psych for all three. So psych in itself can mean psychology. And then psychologist, what you can do is put the word psych, put an apostrophe, and followed by the letter T. And in English, when we use an apostrophe, it signifies that we have left out letters. That's what we do in contractions. And so we can use that same premise for our abbreviations and note-taking. So psychologist, psych apostrophe T, psychological, psych apostrophe L. So by putting that end letter, then we know what word we're talking about. And you can go through and just see that there's some sort of common ones that I've done there. Now, we can even take that a step farther. One of my degrees is in education. So when I got my B.Ed, I heard the words teacher and student every day, all day, every class. So I went so far as that in terms of my abbreviations, an uppercase capital T always means teacher, and an uppercase capital S always means student. And so that is, so I even went that far with my short forms, okay? Now, you can't do that a lot, but you can do that for keywords that you hear all the time. So again, if you're in a computer program, and you're going to hear the word computer, you know, about 1,000,000 times, you can just use a capital C for computer. Or if you're in business, you can use a capital B for business, and so on. So you can think about what are those words that I hear over and over and over again, and can I go so far as just to use a capital letter for them? And that can really be a good way to save some time. So get used to using abbreviations and symbols. It can really make things a lot faster for you. Just make sure that you always have enough of the word to recognize and that you're consistent. Okay? So if you're using comp for computer, then everywhere, every class, every note, you use comp for computer. Okay? Because you don't want to be in situations later where you look at it and you're like, I have no idea what I wrote. Okay, note taking after class. So fill in anything you missed. So you're taking notes in class. It could just be an episode of you sort of flaking out and looking off at the ceiling for a while and you realize you missed quite a bit. Or it could be you didn't understand something. In your notes, leave space, put a big question mark, and just pick up and move on. And don't worry about it. After class, you can fill that in. You can go to the textbook. You can just ask other students quickly. Or you can go up to the professor. Okay? Somehow, some way, you can easily find out that information. And then, as I said earlier, review your notes periodically. Ideally, you're going to review them every single week. 80 to 90% of information is lost if not reviewed. So it's well worth it. A little bit of time every week can make a difference. And identify possible exam questions. Instead of thinking like a student, change your thinking and think like a professor. If I were the professor, what would be a good test question here? So put a star beside those in your notes. Some professors go so far as to say, this would actually be a really good exam question. Great, flag it with a big star. Or if the professor spent a lot of time on something and was very animated about something, put a star beside it. And then later when you see the stars, you know those are things you definitely need to know. Okay, so benefits of regular review, as I've already sort of told you a couple times now. Why relearn everything? With no reviews, you have to relearn the material after a month. So looking at this, percentage remembered, 100%. Here's only 30 minutes, that's it. Look at how far we dropped down in 30 minutes. So 30 minutes after listening to this workshop, you are going to forget probably about 60% of what you heard. Within 12 hours, with no review, you're going to maybe remember 35%, okay? And by a month, you're down to about, let's be generous, maybe 10%. But we can see with the green, with regular review, we can bring that back up to 100, and then we don't lose as much, right? It's not nearly as a sharp drop. So spending a little bit of time every week reviewing your notes from the previous classes, and I don't mean active detailed studying here, I just mean reading them over and reviewing them, can make a huge difference. So by the time the midterm and exam come along, you don't have to start all over from scratch and relearn everything. Because if you have to do that for 5 classes, that's a lot of work, okay? So a bit of work every week can save you a lot in the long run. Okay, so I get asked this a lot, should I rewrite my notes? And my answer is based on what your intent is in rewriting them. If you're going to only copy them out to make them neater, then I would say no. There's no value in that whatsoever. You don't get a mark for your notes. No. If you're going to rewrite your notes with the intent to make study notes, so you're condensing information, you're summarizing, you're paraphrasing, you're linking it to examples, you're actually doing something active with the information, then I would say yes, that has value. Okay, so just think about what is your role, not your role, so what is your intent in rewriting your notes? So common note-taking errors, okay? Crowding. Note-taking should take up a lot of paper, okay? You want to have a lot of space, and the reason is because you want to go back after if you need to and fill in things you maybe forgot or weren't clear on, or someone maybe gave you an example that just sort of set off a light bulb, and you can go back in your notes and say, think of this example. So you want to make sure you have a lot of space, okay? So I just recommend binder paper. It's the easiest thing to do, or spiral notebook, but lots of space. Another common error is trying to write everything. You don't need to write everything. You're not tested on everything. You don't need to know everything. But it's a skill in learning what do I write and what do I not write. And it does get better with time, okay? Not differentiating ideas. So I showed you 3 different styles, the Cornell, the outline, and the concept map, as a way to differentiate your ideas. Another problem, allowing yourself to lose focus and become distracted. If that's an issue, sit closer to the front of the room. You know, turn off things that are distracting you, put other things away, and remember, as soon as you start to find yourself doodling or looking up at the ceiling or whatever, look straight at the professor in the eye, make eye contact with them, and get yourself back on track. Losing notes after class, yeah, it happens a lot. Put them in a binder or do something with them. And can't read it later, it's too messy or too many abbreviations. Yes, we want note-taking to be fast. Yes, we want it to be efficient, but at the same time, they have value to you for studying. So if you can't read them, there's no value, okay? So they need to be neat enough. If handwriting is difficult for you or very messy, then maybe investing in a laptop is a good investment so that you can type them. Now, I'm not going to show you this video, but I'm going to mention it. How to get the most out of studying. There's a 5-part video series on YouTube. If you just go on YouTube and just type in how to get the most out of studying, you'll find them. In part 4, because it's a 5-part series, it's called Putting the Principles for Optimizing Learning into Practice. And it's only about 2 minutes of it, from about the 4-minute mark to 6:05, that talks about note-taking. But all in all, they're an excellent video series by Dr. Stephen Shu, who's a psychologist that specializes in learning, and so they're certainly well worth watching. So, any questions? How can I help you? If you find that you are not doing a great job with your note-taking and would like some more help, please come and see me. If you're here on campus, you can just come into the Learning Center and we can make an appointment. Maybe I can meet with you at that moment. You can send me an email, raquel.lato@algomu.ca. You can give me a call, and I'm on Skype at raquel.lato. So please come and see me. I'm here to help students. And I have an open door policy, so I'm always you know, as willing to help anybody as I can. So thank you very much for watching. If you are a college transfer student who's watching this prior to March 23rd, you can be eligible to enter into the draw for the iPad. What you need to do is email me at raquel.lato@algomu.ca with the name of this workshop, which is note-taking, the password from the workshop, which in this case is the name of the first note-taking style I mentioned that uses 2 columns. So the name of that style, also with 1 tip that you picked up from the video. And if you send me that email with your information, I will fill out 2 ballots for you and enter you into the draw. So that's only for college transfer students, and the draw is going to take place March 23rd at noon. So thank you very much and good luck.